I'm sorry. They're just so bad. Hello again and welcome back to Mimsy Park. We are on episode 4 of this Disney live action remake series, which I clearly have not gotten a better name for yet, but I'm open to suggestions. For episode 4, we are doing 2019's Dumbo. This is one of like 4 movies that was released in 2019 out of this Disney live action collection that they're doing, because we need them jammed down our throats 4 times a year. One every quarter. I went into Dumbo with a fairly open mind. Not too open, because as we know, I don't have much faith in any of these really. But I went into this with more of an open mind simply because Dumbo has never been one of my favorites. Now, to be clear, I like Dumbo. I like the original Dumbo. Brittany and I watched the original one before I came around to watch the new one. And, Brittany, how'd you feel about the old Dumbo?
It's so sad!
So sad. And it really is. Dumbo, the original Dumbo is just sad the whole time. It's just like sad with these little bitty cute moments, but I mean, right as soon as he's born, or I guess arrives in the original, he's made fun of, ridiculed, all that, up until the very end. And at the very end, it's a happy ending. But the original Dumbo is just so sad. And so that's why I know Bambi is considered the saddest Disney movie. Lion King sometimes gets lumped in there. Those two don't have anything on Dumbo. It is heartbreaking from beginning to almost end. So I went into the new one pretty open-minded. The other thing is the original Dumbo clocks in at like, I think it's like 64 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, it's the shortest Disney animated feature. And so there was really, in my mind, from a filmmaking standpoint, a lot of room to expand on this story. This is the first one where I went, you know what? I feel like they could make it better only because you could expand on an extra half hour of film is a long time and tells a very large part of the story. I mean, that's almost a full act right there. So I went into this pretty open-minded, and I came out the other end of this movie really not caring one way or another. I have never watched a more fluff movie in such a long time. And what I mean by that is everything that makes the story have substance in this movie, it's very mediocre. Like, the story is not, it does not draw you in, and that might be why the original drew you in so much, is because it hits so many emotional chords along the way. It's all fluff. It's all super intense music. It's super popping visuals like we're used to from Disney, especially at this point in these live action movies. It's got everything that is glitter, and there's nothing underneath. There's no structure for it to stand on. I mean, from the very beginning of this movie, it's super stylized CGI. And I love Tim Burton. Tim Burton is one of my favorite directors, but even my favorite musicians make crappy music from time to time, or at least not crappy music, but music that I don't like from time to time. And I feel like Tim Burton's style does not lend itself well to Disney movies other than Alice in Wonderland, and it's only because Alice in Wonderland is just trippy and weird, even in the original books. It's just a trippy, weird, outlandish story that we all love, and his style added to that, it doesn't work in Dumbo. It doesn't work. It's too kitschy of a story. It's supposed to be heartwarming. They call it heartwarming. Again, the story of Dumbo is just sad almost entirely all the way through. Spoiler alert, the crows never make an appearance which I knew that was gonna happen going in. And I have mixed feelings on the crows. It's like, yeah, you look at them from today's standpoint, and the crows are super not cool. But you can't judge the past on today's standards. That's just how progression works. So to judge it by today's standards, I don't think is fair. It's definitely a sign of the times of when this movie was made, but I don't think the crows were ever made with any malice or anything like that. The other character that doesn't make an appearance at all in this movie, except as like a nudge to the original, is Timothy H. Mouse. The Jiminy Cricket of Dumbo is not in Dumbo. Timothy H. Mouse is almost more of a main character in the original than Dumbo is, and he is almost nowhere to be seen in this movie. He's seen when you see a mouse with an outfit like Timothy H. Mouse, but I mean, he's even on the Disneyland ride. He even sits at the top of the Disneyland ride, and he's nowhere to be found in this movie. There is so much story that's told with so little in the original. How are you not going to keep one of the two main characters? The pink elephants make an appearance. The weirdest part of the movie makes an appearance, but not a core character from the original. Timothy H. Mouse, not in the new Dumbo. It just doesn't make any sense why you leave him out. To be fair, this movie is not entirely about Dumbo. This movie should have been called Holt. That's what they should have called it. They should have called this movie Holt because that's Colin Farrell's, the main character is not Dumbo, it is Holt, and then his kids, and then Dumbo. This movie is more Free Willy than it was Dumbo. Dumbo is more of a main side character, almost in the way Timothy H. Mouse was in the original, than he is a main character. Luckily, they didn't make him talk, which is the first time I've said that in this whole series, but he's the only character that they've ever had that's so silent that says so much. That's the other thing that was so special about the original, is you had basically, I mean, you had dialogue, obviously, but the communication between Timothy and Dumbo in the original is more of a monologue. I mean, there is the nonverbal communication and everything, but there is so much story and so much of Dumbo's character told in the original without any speech. It's almost like that's why they put so much focus on everybody else in this movie, because they didn't know how to tell that story without there being the dialogue, without there being verbal interaction between the characters. And again, that's a screenwriting thing. The only thing that was familiar to me as far as just staying true to the original in this movie is the sadness. Dumbo looks sad all the time. The animation for Dumbo was actually good, and he's adorable in this movie. He really is. Dumbo has to be adorable. You can't screw up Dumbo, not from an animation standpoint anyway. As you can see with this movie, you can absolutely screw up Dumbo. And it's by having somebody that has a very particular style do something that is not within his style. I'm not saying Tim Burton doesn't have a range. That's not what I'm saying. But when you see a Tim Burton movie, you know it's a Tim Burton movie. And this went from feeling like all the animation we've seen in the other three up until this point, and that was another issue that I had with this movie that I'm starting to realize is an issue in all of them so far, and that's that the animation always looks the same. All of the animation in these movies looks the same, and what I mean by that is kind of like Assassin's Creed is a great example. For any gamers out there, Assassin's Creed got and continues to get a lot of crap for basically churning out titles on the same graphics engine over and over again. You basically have small little tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's always the same game. Just like with a lot of sports games, it's basically the same engine recycled over and over again, and it eventually, at least with video games, over the course of a couple years or more, becomes very stale. It's the same thing in this. Once you start to notice that this animation all looks the same, the more stale it starts to become, because it's basically like you're just recycling this over and over again. And it's part of why they're able to churn out 4 of them in 2019. The big buildup in the original was Dumbo flying. Now, his ears have gotten him into trouble in the original in the beginning, But the whole flying thing is something they don't realize until they wake up in a tree and they figure out, well, how else could he have gotten there? Now, to be fair, in the original, they come to that conclusion real quick. In this one, it's more of just something he does that they harness, and it's a big plot point. It's pretty much the thing in this movie that drives the movie forward until the end. I don't know if we're supposed to go into this already knowing that he can fly, so it's not supposed to be a thing, but that's part of the experience. Part of the charm of the original was him being freakish and not really having an advantage one way or the other in life, and then at the very end figures out he has this great advantage and he overcame all this adversity to finally be given a break. In this one, it's the thing that drives the whole story. It's the reason Dumbo is Dumbo. Not because of his ears, but because of what his ears can do. And that's a huge deviation from the original. And one, again, if there's so little that you could follow that would stick to the original, why not stick to those and then expand on it? There was so much room to expand on this movie, even based off of the original. You could have just kept the core of that and expanded on that. Colin Farrell's daughter, honestly, I did not like her. She's that typical kid that's been through trauma and now she's just off-putting and she's just rude and she doesn't want to help. It's that I'm too good for my situation, but she doesn't do anything to make the situation better. It's just like she's just a brat. She's just a brat. She's not likable. I didn't find her to be likable even a little bit. And she's kind of that way through the majority of the beginning. Now, eventually she does become a little bit warmer and you do start to like her. She starts to open up and everything, but it happens at like the halfway point of this movie. You have to get through a lot of going, I really can't stand this little girl. The whole scene where Mrs. Jumbo finally goes to elephant prison, I guess, when she has her freak out and everything, it's caused because she's starting to get a little riled up. She's calmed down, and then Max comes out and yells, "Mad elephant," or whatever he yells. Again, another forgettable line from this movie. But the thing is, they had him do it after she's already calmed down, and I would say that maybe it's just because his character's evil and he's a bad guy, and so he did it on purpose. But the look on his face that they make him have on his face, where he's super surprised about what's happening, tells me that that's just, it was supposed to be him coming out and yelling at her. The timing was just weird. The whole scene is just weird. It's like she calms down and then again, more things about these movies that don't make sense to me. The only scene in this movie that I actually remember liking is the scene where he goes up and sees his mom when she's in the cart. And they do Baby of Mine through that whole scene, because how could you not? But it was like the one thing that really harken back to the original, and even that, it was like they want to keep it realistic because this is photorealistic animation, supposedly. Now, there is a point in the movie where it just deviates on to its own little story, where it's its own thing at this point, where they leave the circus to go to a bigger circus, a theme park more like, really. And it's Michael Keaton's theme park. And that's really the issue I have with so many of these movies. Michael Keaton, I love Michael Keaton. Danny DeVito, I love Danny DeVito. Colin Farrell, I can go one way or another with him. These movies have actors, directors, cinematographers that I like, that do a good job, but the story is so off the rails and so poorly executed that that's really where my bad feelings come in for these movies, even though they've got people that I really like. And at a certain point, the family does take Dumbo, and Michael Keaton's character buys up the circus. Of course, he's the villain. From the very beginning, you can see that he's the villain, and something bad's gonna happen because, like most of this movie, it's predictable how it's gonna end, how it's gonna go. And this is really the point where I started to go, this is starting to feel like a Tim Burton freewheeling. When we go into the theme park looks like an updated version of what you would expect from like Batman Returns. It's almost like the Batman Returns vibe brought into Dumbo and Disney 5. This is where they just kind of ran with it in a whole new direction. But I do have to say, this whole part where it was like Tim Burton's baby at this point, you could tell it was just kind of him taking it where he wanted it to go. I didn't really check out at that point, but it was still just so spread out. You have all these different stories going on at this point. At this point in the movie, you have whatever Holt and his family are doing, and then you also focus on the daughter at a certain point, and you start to get back. You get so many backstories and so many things going on that it starts to feel like a soap opera crammed into like a really short amount of time, as far as soap operas go anyway. Now, I know I said that the only scene I really liked was with Dumbo and his mom at the cart. I will say the way they got the pink elephant scene into this movie was actually extremely creative, and that was actually pretty cool, because if you remember in the original, him and Timothy get drunk. They just straight up get drunk. He's a baby elephant, and it's a kid's movie, and they just straight up get drunk. In this one, it's actually done with bubbles, which is funny because there's still a bubbles aspect to it with them getting drunk in the original, but it's more the performers in the circus. That's how they get the pink elephants into this movie, and that whole scene was really cool because it's the only scene that really feels natural in such a stylized lighting and a stylized cinematography. It was really well done, just in general. This is really where I think the cinematographer got to have fun. It's a lot of pink, obviously, mostly pink, but it's just the way everything moves and everything in this whole scene. I really, really enjoyed that. And we do get Michael Buffer, the Ready to Rumble guy. He is the one that introduces Dumbo twice. The first time it really kind of catches you off guard. The second time it's kind of like, oh, you're doing this again. But I also think it really kind of helps you see that it's like a repetitive process when you're actually in the circus, rather than from the outside where it seems fresh and new and special and magical. And going back to Michael Keaton's character, I really liked Michael Keaton in this. He does make a good bad guy. My whole issue with the villain bad guy Dumbo battle thing is the original was really, Dumbo didn't really have an enemy. It was almost like he was his own worst enemy, and it was kind of him against the world, which really added into how you feel and how you empathize and really sympathize with Dumbo in the first one. In this, it's a very clear-cut, like, good guy, bad guy kind of thing, except the good guy is more Holt versus Michael Keaton's character. Again, once you realize that this movie's all fluff, everything else just kind of falls apart. It's not sitting on a solid foundation. There really is that like clear-cut good guy versus bad guy dilemma here versus what we had in the first one, which was more Dumbo versus the world versus himself kind of thing, which makes you really cheer for him more towards the end when he finally comes out the victor, whereas this is just like, we're battling this one guy and we won against this one guy. Not like I triumphed over a lot of adversity. I triumphed over one bad guy and now I come out the victor. This movie took me back to what Martin Scorsese said about the Marvel movies, which is they feel more like theme park rides. Dumbo, of all of them so far, feels the most like that. It did. It felt more like a theme park ride than a story that really pulls you in. And I don't know if that's just because you have so many stories going on at one time. I'm telling you, you have what's going on with Danny DeVito and the circus and the troupe, and then you have what's going on with Holt, you have what's going on with Dumbo, you have Ava Green's character, who, again, whose name I can't remember, and whatever dilemma she's going through. You have Michael Keaton, and then Michael Keaton starts having issues with the I mean, there's so much going on in this movie that there's really just not enough time to invest in any one character except Dumbo, who again is more of a side character in this. He is not a main character like he should be. He's a titular character. He is not the main character in this movie. He is featured in this movie and he plays a big part, but he is absolutely a supporting character in this movie, which is also similar to Free Willy. I mean, Willy was the titular character, but it wasn't really about Free Willy. And even how the movie plays out is like Free Willy. The whole thing feels like Free Willy adapted by Tim Burton to the world of Dumbo. And an issue that I have with, I think, all of them so far, in one way or another, the music. It's not to be found except Baby of Mine. I understand the Crows aren't in this movie, and I understand that one of the other big songs in the original Dumbo was the Crows, and then also the work song. That work song was probably my favorite one in the original, and it doesn't make an appearance in this movie. There is a whole scene, and again, one of the things that does stand out about the original to me is if you watch that entire scene with the workers setting up the circus, they're all black. All of them. So it's like, yeah, okay, I understand we can't do that. I totally get that. At the same time, you could have put that song in there rather than having what I assume are slaves setting up your circus. In this, it's the troupe, which is actually pretty accurate. The troupe would be the one helping set everything up. Why not have them do the song? You could have had them do the song. Again, I don't understand if you had so few elements to stick to make it feel like the original and still be able to extrapolate on that. Why would you not do that? Two big things stuck out about this movie to me at the end. One was Holt gets a robotic hand to replace his arm, or I guess a robotic arm, when I don't think electronics were a thing yet. So that kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. Like it was this like weird glimpse of steampunk in Dumbo. It was weird. I didn't understand that at all. And it seems like a thing where they were just like, yeah, now he has this. Well, how do we explain that? It doesn't make sense. Oh, no, they don't care. And again, that's a big problem with a lot of these movies to me, is it feels just like they're like, the audience won't notice. It's kind of like the same issue I had with Cinderella, where they're going through and they're narrating stuff that not only are they already depicting on screen, but things that they could have also depicted on screen without narration and still gotten the story across. Narration, other than to introduce a film or to use sparingly throughout a film, is lazy and insulting to the audience. Throughout this whole movie, this little girl has these dreams of being something bigger. Like I said, it's part of the issue with her, is that she wants to do something bigger and better than what she's got, but she does it in this way of, I'm better than this. And then at the end, she's a projectionist. She doesn't want to be in the circus throughout this whole movie. And at the very end, she is perfectly content being a projectionist. And she's completely content with that, which is fine, but it doesn't make any sense. There's no continuity at that point. But again, I think it's because there's so much going on in this movie. It stretches this story so thin and in so many different directions. Even the ending where they're getting Dumbo's mom out, it's just very like, I've seen this all before. It goes back to something that I've heard for years and years and years and years. You can have everything look as nice as you want it to be. It can pop, it can sound good, but if the story is not there, it's still gonna fall short. And that is a perfect way of explaining these Disney live action movies, is the story is lacking so much substance, and not just the story on how it flows, what it's about, but the characters. You don't have the character development there. You don't have the emotions. You don't have these relatable characters. You basically just have characters that are already characters that you're banking on people already being invested in. And then you just put them up on screen. Beauty and the Beast stuck so well to the original story, and it had these things here and there that really took away from what we loved about the original, but not to the point where it took away from the original in its entirety. Beauty and the Beast so far, of all four of these, is the one that has stuck truest, and the one that I will say Beauty and the Beast is the only one so far that I would go back and watch again. That's one of those movies where it would be cool to watch the original and then watch the new one too, because again, they did so well in bringing a Disney movie to life. But again, it had its issues, mostly with animation, which is what's driving me insane, is that Disney is doing animation wrong. Not that they're doing animation in its entirety wrong, but when it's animation based off of animation that already existed and you go this off the rails with it, I know you want it to be photorealistic, but it just doesn't work. I feel like that could be the new name of the series. It just doesn't work. But guys, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Manic Movie Reviews. Again, 2019's Dumbo, just super mediocre. It's just like there's thrills. It's like a roller coaster. You go down, you start going around, and you wait for the next exciting thing to happen. And that's pretty much how it feels. It feels like you're just jumping from one reference and one exciting thrill ride to the next without any substance really in the middle. So go check out 2019's Dumbo if you want to. Don't expect a lot, or maybe you're not crotchety like I am and you'll actually enjoy it. Either way, go check out the movie if you haven't already. These episodes are full of spoiler alerts, so if you're watching them without going and seeing the original movies, sorry about that. I shouldn't have to say spoiler alert. Maybe I should start saying spoiler alert. Spoiler alert! But with that said, guys, I do hope you are staying safe at home and healthy. Go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, leave movie suggestions down in the comments if you so choose. I will check them out. I will review them. Hopefully someday it gets to be an overwhelming list and I will have to say I will get around to them when I can, but for now, I will watch the movies you guys suggest if you leave them down in the comments. Like, subscribe, comment, suggest. I will see you guys next time.